Hey, fabulous fifth graders. Okay, so today we have some new notes that we're going to be taking, and we're going to be working on page 27, and it all just goes along with everything that we've been doing from divisibility rules down. We're just kind of building our background for fractions. And so today we're going to be talking about finding common denominators also known as the least common denominator. And so the date is 3/4/2021. And so we're going to turn to the next available right and left side page, right past page 26, where we did our comparing, ordering, and rounding fractions. Down here on the bottom right, we're going to write page 27. The next thing we have was 3/4/2021. And so we're going to talk about finding the LCD, or the least common denominator. So that's what we're going to title our notes today. I'm sorry, this is going to be a little crazy for a second. So our objective, I can extend my knowledge of equivalent fractions in order to find the LCD of two fractions and convert them. Okay. So if you will, please fold your page in half. I'm going to open it back up, and we've got some step-by-step directions. Okay, so here we go. Step one. Maybe if I can get my hands to work, I apologize. So step one is to identify the two denominators. Step one is to identify the two denominators, and that is an E after the D there. Step two is to find the least common multiple, which is also, in this case, going to be the least common denominator. And remember, we have the upside down cake, and and that's also known as the ladder method. Or we have listing with the multiple monster. Okay, and you have those notes. So we find the least common multiple, also known as the least common denominator, whichever way we see fit. Step 3 is going to be set up the equation for equivalent fractions I'm going to show you what that looks like here in a moment. And then we're going to ask how to get from original denominator to the least common denominator. Could be also we multiply by what fancy form of 1. Okay, and we multiply here because for the most part they're going to be getting larger. Multiple monster. And the fourth and final step is to solve. Okay, so here we go. We're going to do a couple of example problems, and then we're going to save some room to do some example problems in class. The first example problem that I want to look at here is I have three eighths and 9/20. And I want to find the least common denominator of those two fractions. Okay, least common denominator. And I want to rewrite those fractions as their new equivalent. So my first step is to identify the two denominators. So my denominators are 8 and 20. And so of those two numbers, I'm going to find the least common multiple or the least common denominator. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to do my upside down birthday cake. Remember, I only pull out prime numbers. So I ask myself, okay, are they even? Do they end in 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8? Yes, so I can pull out a 2. 8 divided by 2 gives me 4. 20 divided by 2 gives me 10. So again, I ask myself, is there something I can pull out of both these numbers? Well, if I go through my divisibility rules, the first flap is even numbers, and they both end in 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8. So I can continue with a 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Now here is where we would say, okay, here's my simplified fraction. Well, that's not what we're doing. We're still using the same tool. But remember, my least common multiple is the L. Okay, so I'm going to put an L over here next to upside down birthday cake so we remember what we're talking about. Because it's an L. So we take the L. So we take all of these numbers, 2 times 2 times 2 times 5. So my least common denominator here is going to be 2 times 2 times 2 times 5. That gives me 8 times 5, and so it is 40. So that is my least common denominator. So now, step 3 says to set up an equation for equivalent fractions. So I'm going to continue on down here. I'm going to say, okay, 3/8 times what fancy form of 1 equals something over 40, because this is my least common denominator, so I want to get here. I also have to do the same thing for 9/20. 9/20. So I ask myself, times what fancy form of 1 equals something over 40. Okay, I want to know. So I ask myself, how do I get from 8 to 40? How do I get there? 8 times what gives me 40? 5. Whatever I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. That is my fancy form of 1. Okay, so now I have to do the same thing in the top. What is 3 times 5? Well, it is 15. Very good. So now I come down here, I ask myself, okay, how do I get from 20 to 40? 20 times what gives me 40? 2. Yes. Whatever I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. 9 times 2 is 18. And so now I have two new fractions. They're equivalent fractions with a common denominator, and so I can do a lot of things with these. Now this will also help you with comparing and ordering fractions, but it's going to help you with adding and subtracting fractions later on as well. So that's the first example. So let's look at another example. Get a little different color here. Another example. So I have example number 2, and that was example number 1. What if I had this here? What if I had 2/3 and 5/6? So step 1 is to identify the denominators. So my denominators are 3, 6. And then step 2 is to take and find the least common denominator of those two numbers. What can I pull out of both 3 and 6? You're right, it's a 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. So remember, my least common multiple is the L, and so I have 3 times 1 times 2. So my least common denominator is actually going to be 6. So something that I notice here is this one already has a denominator of 6, so I'll tell you we don't have to do anything to that one because it's already there, because 6 times what will give you a denominator of 6? 1, that's right. So 5/6 is already there, but we're going to rewrite 2/3 times what fancy form of 1 gives me something over 6, something with a denominator of 6. 3 times what gives me 6? 2. Whatever I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. 2 times 2 is 4. So now, if my least common denominator is 6, I have 4/6 and 5/6. Oops. I'm going to move those up for you. Okay? Very good. So now, for a small entrance ticket for Monday and Tuesday of next week, your day 1, I want you to find the least common denominator of 7/24 and 5/8. So the least common denominator of 7/24 and 5/8. That's number 1 for your entrance ticket. Number 2, I want you to find the least common denominator of 11/15 and 13/36. Okay, so find me the least common denominators of those two questions, and I will see you guys on day 1 next week, Monday and Tuesday.